welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have Ryan McCay. Hey Ryan, what's up, man?
Hey Clifton, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Just thrilled to have you on the show. And
You-
some of our listeners, if you don't know Ryan, he is with Yellowcake Pedals,
Yep.
and we met at Summer Nail.
Yep.
And I thought it was interesting. I was actually a little surprised when I saw on you guys' names tag, you and the other guy that was with you.
Andy, yeah.
Andy, yes.
Andy Branton.
Andy
the fabulous, the fabulous Andy Branton.
Now, does he work with you guys?
He's just a really good friend. He actually works. He's a gigging musician around Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and he plays some gigs in Georgia.
Okay.
And he plays with a couple different guys. He grew up, I think, in Athens, Alabama. He lives in Tuscaloosa. He works at a shop in town called Eat My Beats. It's kind of like it's a guitar shop, service shop for amps and guitars, and they also do a lot of like equipment rentals and stage setups and stuff like that.
I see. Okay. And
I
you're
kind of through actually we met at SummerNAMM last year, and then we kind of just became friends, really good friends, and then I hadn't really lined anybody up to help me work my booth because I knew that just doing it by myself was not impossible, but it would be like not having to leave it to go to the bathroom or something.
yeah.
And leaving it unattended was not something I really wanted to do, and so he agreed to do it. I was already rooming with the guys from Copper Sound Pedals, who are really good friends.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
They're based out of Boston area,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had planned to stay with them, and we were going to just kind of cut down on expenses. And so I asked them if it was okay because he was going to meet up later, like on Thursday, because I got there on Tuesday, and I asked him, "Is it cool if Andy stays with us? And if you need me to, do you need me to pitch in for something as far as like his side of rent or whatever?" But we already had a really full house. They're like, "No, it's fine." So I said, well, if you can get up to Nashville, because I'm getting there a lot earlier, and I know you got other stuff going on. If you can get there, if you can get your way up there, and you'll basically have a free place to stay. And so he was just like, yeah, and it really worked out because he wanted to experience it from this side of things, and he met some cool people on his own and stuff, and it was a really good experience for him and for me. And he was definitely, if I could have him work a booth with me next time, definitely. He was great.
That's
He was
awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
Now, are you based out of Alabama as well? You're in
Yeah,
Tuscaloosa, right?
I live in Tuscaloosa.
Cool. Well, I
I
spent a
actually-
lot of time going back and forth to Tuscaloosa as a kid.
Did you really?
Yeah, I had a lot of family over there, and had on one side of the family I had an aunt, and then on my dad's side of the family he has a brother that still lives over there in Northport, and
okay.
so went back and forth there, hung out on McFarland, and you know,
How long ago? When was the last time you actually came to town to
uh,
visit?
geez, it was like on a Thanksgiving, probably about 4 or 5 years ago that I've
Yeah.
actually spent time there.
It hasn't changed. Well, I guess 4 or 5 years it probably has. It probably has changed. A lot of new things pop up here all the time, and traffic's kind of gotten a little crazier, and all the rebuilding they've done since the tornado from 2011,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
and it's just kind of like it's kind of nutty, and can be, and you wouldn't think so for such a small town, but they're just trying to cram too much in one small space. It makes things difficult and at times. So, and then the college town part of things. So
Yeah,
there you go.
it's a pretty busy little town, and it's not too far out of Birmingham, so it's almost like the Twin Cities of Alabama a little bit.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, Birmingham's like about 50 miles away. Birmingham's really great. It has some great spots. I try to get there as often as I can, which is not often enough. I'd like to go actually visit this weekend and see some friends if I can, but who knows what's going to be happening and what I'm going to be feeling like doing. So
Yeah. Now, you're not from there, are you?
no, I grew up in northern Indiana, and then I lived at about 20. I moved out and moved to Indy for like 7 years, and then I moved here and I was married for a long time, and I've got kids and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not married at this point, so, but that's just one of those things, I don't really talk about, just one of those.
Right.
It just happens, But that's always part of the story. It's like, well, how did you end up in Indiana or Alabama? So I was like, and I'm always like, well, this is kind of what happened. Long story short, I got married and I'm not married anymore.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like, okay, and it's kind of just move along from that type of thing. So
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just part of it. I mean, I've lived here for I moved here in September of 2002, so it'll be 15 years in next.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been here for a long time. A lot of changes since I've been here for sure. It's definitely. I'm glad I get to travel a little bit now because of Yellowcake and go to places like Nashville or wherever, because that helps me kind of like just kind of get away, because it can feel a little bit it's claustrophobic living here sometimes. So
yeah.
That's just me. I don't care about the football or any of that kind of stuff. I kind of like as much different things as possible, and sometimes you feel like you don't get that here.
Yeah.
And so I need to go visit someplace or do something because I got to get out of here. I'm going to lose my mind type of thing. So.
Right. Well, with the University of Alabama there, I mean, that's kind of like the king of that town,
Yeah, very much, very much. This town would be a lot different if it wasn't for the university. It'd be a lot smaller, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. Obviously, you play guitar, but give me a kind of the backstory of, how you got into music and then what led you into Yellowcake.
Well, let's see, where to begin. I started playing trumpet like in elementary school, and then worked your way up through like all the bands and. Mm-hmm. Blah 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 blah, and school bands and marching bands and stuff. And at some point, I kind of decided that I was burned out on it, and I really was. And I kind of stopped. Before I had completely stopped playing trumpet, I had picked up guitar because I really liked the idea of that. Thanks to Eddie Van Halen and people like that, mm-hmm. And just became a self-taught player, and sort of just played for my own enjoyment. It was always kind of difficult because I think of where I lived between Indiana and Indianapolis to find like-minded musicians, and also still growing as a musician. I'm not really sure where I wanted to go as far as that goes. And then at one point about, oh gosh, how many years ago? 2008 or whatever, I decided to tinker around with pedal ideas. I was seeing all this stuff on the internet about, I had a true small collection of effects pedals, and I was not really sure what I was after. But one thing I totally did not like is the fact that I didn't have on a couple of my Boss pedals. It seemed like I'd have to dime out my volume on them, and I'm still not getting enough output volume. And it became very frustrating, and it also was like a chance to try or learn something new to occupy my mind, because I think at some point I just kind of became, I don't know, bored or whatever stuff. And not that life was boring. I mean, I was already, in the middle of being a dad for the first time and all this kind of stuff, but I just needed something to like challenge me a little bit, and so I started tinkering around with just small, simple designs, and then I decided to try to just do one of my own and see what would happen. And that one was, which ultimately became the furry burrito.
Okay.
And that had been out. Actually, that's been out quite around a long time. There's been several changes, but like the incarnation that it is now, as far as the footprint setup and control setup, has pretty much been that way for 4 or 5 years. And 3 years ago I decided to start trying to really push it out there in powder coating, having powder drilling done and UV printing and all that stuff, because before I was doing everything myself, and the etching of the boxes was really kind of tough, and it was really kind of hard to get. I just wasn't really sure how to get out there in the marketplace, and meeting somebody like a good friend of mine, who's now a good friend of mine, Brandon from Elevation Boutiques, who kind of gave me the heads up about certain things. As far as the business, but I'm still not really sure what the hell it is I'm doing, because I'm probably still not. But he would mention, he's like, it was like April of 2014. I was starting to really try to pitch to dealers with a true finished product. The whole powder coat, UV printing. To try to do it at more of a grander scale than the one at a time, and with the etching of the boxes, because of it. My process of doing that was not probably very, obviously not cost effective, and B, and really labor intensive. And if it didn't work out, which sometimes it didn't, it was like, to start all over. Mm-hmm. It's a ton of time. So it's one of those creative things you just kind of had to learn to let go. So he was trying to get me to come at least walk around the Summer NAMM in 2014, and I was like, no, I can't really do that at this point. And also not exactly knowing what I'm getting myself into. So by the time I'm slowly starting to try to push these out, and still, it's just a slow process, and it still is a slow process getting your name out there and stuff. And so I finally, like a year later, I had 2 ready to go. I had the Free Burrito, which was already out there in the marketplace, and the Fried Gold, which was starting to get out there. Mm-hmm. Just was able, with the kind gesture from John Snyder from Creation Pedal Boards, who got me a pass. I'm 3.5 hours away from Nashville, so it's not a huge effort to get up there. Mm-hmm. And got an Airbnb and whatever, and wow, man, I'll tell you what, it's like having your eyes open for the first time to a certain degree, and it was just the most amazing thing that has ever happened. To me at that point, I was like, wow, this is great. Not even really knowing what I'm getting myself into, not knowing, like, how are people going to be, who am I going to be, not really having a real clear idea of what the gear community really was at this point. Mm-hmm. And then I just met like so many different people, and everybody for the most part was so great and so just easy to talk to and so much fun to be around. And just, I felt like, being trapped in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, trying to follow what maybe some people could probably look at as a pipe dream or whatever, or, it's just a hobby and all that kind of stuff. And to find out and feeling that I'm like the weird one because I'm doing this, and this, Tuscaloosa is not even really a pedal town either. It's not a big gear town. There's musicians that have pedal boards and stuff, but it's not like when you go to some of the bigger areas in the bigger cities where you just have really good guitar shops, right. Mom and shops. We have a couple good ones, but even Birmingham, I mean, there's not really very many good places that a lot of people know about to have a nice selection of boutique pedals. Guitar Center doesn't count. Mason's Music has started to. A couple of my pedals are in their shop. But it's outside of that, there's nowhere really to go. Yeah. And it's kind of like a starved environment for that kind of stuff. And so here I am, like, not knowing what I'm doing, feeling really weird. Mm-hmm. About it, and then finally finding out after I go to something like a NAMM, the Summer NAMM, and it was like everybody was just so great and so fantastic. I couldn't believe that I was just, in a sense, felt very much welcomed with open arms. And at that point, I had already been doing Instagram for about just over a year. So I was meeting people that I had met that were following me, and I was following them on Instagram, and then meeting them for the first time was like, wow. And then It was like, I don't know, it's really hard to kind of put into words how it all just kind of worked that way, and it was just like, and it just kind of just, the feeling of rejuvenation of the fuel that I got from that, of just wanting to really keep going with it and push harder as much as I can when at all possible.
Yeah.
And it totally went on from there. And then last year, I just released the fifth pedal 2 years later, and just, did my second show. It's my third NAMM, but my second one, having a booth. It was just, wow. I'm so glad and so fortunate and so lucky to be able to just be at this level and just to slowly be able to continue to grow it and work out there and work my way out more and more and all that kind of stuff. And it's just really fantastic. So, yeah, it's great. I think I really went around the world on that one, but
no, it gave us a lot of good stuff to jump off on. I can attest to the fact that, well, first of all, when I ran across Yellowcake's booth, and I found out you guys were like over in Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I was like blown away because like most of these guys, that I'm meeting are like out in California or up in the north east or something like that, and our Midwest,
everywhere.
yeah. And
two other guys that build pedals in Birmingham, two other companies. There's Swindler, and
Okay.
he was actually walking around. And then 323 Effects, which you don't really see a lot of him. I think he's been pretty busy with. I think he recently had his first child in the last year. But like Sam and Drew from Swindler, but it was Drew was the one that was there. Sam was back here, I guess.
yeah,
They do a lot more of the modulation / like DSP reverb stuff, and they do some really good stuff. But like, yeah, I didn't even know that these guys were around until I started.
yeah.
Crazy.
And that's one of the things about NAMM is it's not just the guys who have booths. There's plenty of companies that will get a pass and be walking the floor, shaking hands, and a lot of guys, that's kind of how they work it. They just going around, and you meet a lot of really cool people that way.
Oh yeah. It was amazing the first year because all I did was walk around constantly all day for 3 days. And it was a little bit of an adjustment to kind of have to be in one spot,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's easier for people to kind of really see and hear your stuff. But I've always been told, and I've never been to the California one yet, but everybody has always said, and I can believe it by just looking at the pictures, that it is super, super crowded. It's super, super. It's like basically somebody said this past NAMM that like, because you know how big the hall was where everybody was as far as. Somebody said it was like 4 of those on top of each other, one on top of the other. I guess it's 4 levels of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's super, super crazy and super busy and super way louder. And some people have even said in the past that it's harder to talk to people because it's so loud and so crazy. And the cosplay people come out, I guess, and then all the celebrities are around, and people are clamoring and running around trying to see them. The musicians, the more popular musicians, celebrity types, and
Yeah.
And people have said that a lot of people have mentioned that they like Nashville better because you feel like it's more of a relaxing environment. It's more, just a little more laid back and not as crazy. I mean, to me, it's still crazy, but it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
yeah, I kept hearing that from a lot of guys. And I don't know. Well, I'm actually planning on going in January out there. And I like looked up the tickets as soon as I left Nashville, and I was like, wow, it's really cheap to fly in the wintertime. And so I was like, well,
depends
I'll
on
just
where you're
plunge into it. Yeah.
Because you'd be flying out of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And New Orleans is a bigger airport than like Birmingham.
Yeah.
Are they even posting flights yet?
Yeah, I was able to go on and book my flight, and it was insanely cheap. Of course, now I think the reason why is because I can get a direct flight to LA from New Orleans.
Right.
And anytime you're doing like the connecting stuff that like even like I wanted to look at flying to Nashville because I had to leave at like 2:00 in the morning to get there, the first day. And
Really?
yeah,
How, no, it's what is it? 7 hours?
about 7 hours.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I was looking at trying to fly there, and it was like insanely expensive. And I'm like, that's not that far of a drive, 7 hours versus, you're looking at a $500 to $600 plane ticket from New Orleans to Nashville. And what I found out is like there aren't that many like direct flights there, and that's absurd to me,
Right.
That,
You think? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think because since Birmingham is not a main hub, it's more expensive. But the earlier you book a flight, typically you can find a really good deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't looked at the LA flights. I don't know what airline did you use?
Southwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be able to get a direct flight. Here's the thing. I'm also not 100% sure that I'm going yet. I want to go. I know I can't. At this point, I'm not in a place to have a booth, even though they're doing 6x8s this year, the smaller ones. But just the expense alone to get everything out there and everything back and having to coordinate at this point, whatever, there's other options I guess I could go with. I could try to, I guess maybe Grant from Big Ear might be doing the same kind of booth that he did with the collection booth.
That was really interesting too. Like, I saw that, like Grant doing that, and then there was like a guitar booth that went along those same kind of lines with like the guitar builders, and they had a lot of guitars from across the country where guys had sent in guitars to be displayed at that booth, and I thought that was really neat.
Stomp Box Deli, they did one. It was a smaller. It was like a 10 by 10 for Stomp Boxes, and it was the same kind of premise as Grant's. They've been doing it longer than Grant, but Grant had a really large booth. I think it was a 10 by 30.
Mm-hmm.
But he also had a ton of people in there, and I think if it would have been cheaper, cheaper than Stomp Box. Stomp Box Deli is typically a little bit expensive, and Grant's prices for doing the same kind of thing were hair cheaper, I believe. But I was already doing my own thing. But like, I talked to him. I said, "Are you doing California?" He's like, "Well, I'm not sure." I was like, "Well, let me know if you are. I'm interested in hearing like how much it would cost.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I don't make it out there, how much are you charging? Blah blah blah. Plus, to get, because he has to get all that stuff out there. Oh God, I can't get it. What a nightmare."
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't decided yet. I really would like to. I think it would be a good thing. But finances and trying to get away and all that kind of.
Yeah. Now, so do you work out? I mean, you work outside of the Yellowcake thing is not your full-time thing.
No, it's not. I have a full-time job. My full-time job don't even know that I do the Yellowcake thing because nobody's really into music and whatever. Yeah. And I always like to kind of keep that separate because I don't want it to be a topic of conversation, and I also don't want people. I don't know. I just feel because things are been kind of the dynamic at that place of employment has been very weird for the last couple years, and they kind of sometimes I feel approach certain things from the higher up supervisory level and I'm kind of like a passive aggressive
mm-hmm.
of handling things, and the less that I'm on somebody's radar to be a target for that, the better off I probably am.
Sure. Yeah. Be like, well, he's got this side business, so he said, I mean, if we have to do layoffs, you find yourself in that position.
Right. And yeah, and also because the most important thing, obviously, as much as I would love to be doing this full time, it has to make sense to be able to do it at full time, mm-hmm. and also to make sure that everything else is taken care of, covered with, making sure that, everything else, health insurance, children, that kind of stuff is taken care of and proper.
Sure.
Because I don't want to just, it'd be different if I was probably younger and didn't have other responsibilities and all that kind of stuff. But once you do that, it's kind of changes things. So it just definitely makes the to go a lot more, just to get to the end result of making it a full-time thing, just a longer journey if that were to happen, but
Yeah.
which is fine, just like I said, sometimes I get impatient with I wish I was, because sometimes I sit at work and I'm like, I just would rather be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that really at this point is not a possibility, but I can bust my butt like I do because I believe in it to try to get there, and see what happens. So
Yeah, I find that a lot of builders that I've met are doing exactly what you're doing. They're
right.
they're working the full-time job. They're doing this and want to really see it take off. And I admire that a lot because it's hard to
It's
to
to do
do
both.
both. Yeah, it is.
Especially it's a lot of hours. I mean, I work when I'm not with my kids. I mean, I'm always doing this, which is fine. I mean, because what else am I really going to do? I'm not really sure at this point if I wasn't doing this, what I would really do with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably be going absolutely stir crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't know what to do with all the extra time, and because at this point I can't really turn my brain off, I have to keep doing it. It's because I look forward to getting out of work and going to work. I mean,
Yeah. No, I totally hear that, and it's like I was talking to a guitar builder friend of mine, and he sets aside certain nights of the week when he gets off work, he goes straight to his garage and he starts building guitars.
Right, starts working on whatever he left from the last time. That's right.
Yep. Well, let's talk about now Yellowcake has got this kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what I'm when I look at Yellowcake, it's got this post-apocalyptic Fallout kind of theme going in the artwork, and the art kind of reflects like a sci-fi kind of
I guess probably it does. The name itself obviously is enriched uranium.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I approach each name or whatever to be its own entity, and the only thing that's really different in the art is the logo is always the same. Everything else is kind of different. The last two pedals, the Lida Machine, which is the newest one, and the MK Ultra, those names come from obviously the whole conspiracy, mind control, behavioral suggestion, modules, that kind of stuff. Your mom was just meant to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
The fuzz pedal, and then the fried gold. The fried gold was basically I take names of stuff, the things that I really like, and then I also kind of I know, hopefully I'm not giving too much away. I go through and I actually will Google things to see if there's another pedal named that.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, to see how relevant it is. Obviously MK Ultra, I mean, that's just, people know about that, everybody knows about it for the most part. You're not, the Lida Machine was really something that nobody really heard of, which I thought was great. I couldn't believe that nobody had ever made a pedal and called it Your Mom, which I thought was fun. And, I don't mind vulgar names for pedals, but for myself, not really, just for the simple fact that, I've got kids, and anything with a vulgarity on there would be like, Daddy, I just didn't want to have that conversation or have to explain that. Your Mom was about as
cutting edge there.
It was about as cutting edge as it was going to get, because you can go any way you want with it. You can go very, if you want to be vulgar with it, you can. If you just wanted to be just cheeky, you can, and that was fine. The Furry Burrito was never anything sexual or anything, because people have even mentioned that, and I'm like, well, if that's how you interpret it, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you what it should be and shouldn't be, but it's basically it's a moldy burrito.
Yeah. Well, you find a lot of the fuzz pedals kind of having those kind of names, and so I kind of see that's kind of like off the tongue kind of look at that, but at the same time, it's kind of like clean enough that your kids could be like playing with your pedal board, and they're not gonna ask you questions.
Right. Yeah, and a furry burrito was always that, because like if I even Google like furry burrito, what I see the most of is people's pets wrapped up in tight little like swaddled in blankets and stuff, and they're like a kitty heads poking out, like, oh, look at my furry, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. Mine was always based off of like that's what my mom would call, like, if you had leftover Mexican or a leftover burrito and you leave it in the fridge too long, she's like, you better hurry up and eat that or you're going to end up having a furry burrito, because the mold gets really kind of little fuzzy and furry and stuff. And it made me think of the concept pedal at the time that I was working on, which was the furry burrito. And yeah, it just kind of fits. It's just.
Well, let's talk about the on the pedals here. I'm looking at your website.
Okay.
And on the furry burrito, it says hand wired. Is that the case on all the pedals, or are you using PCB? Okay.
It's probably something I haven't. Hand wired, like, I mean, there is a PCB, but everything is populated and soldered by hand.
Okay.
So every time you open up a pedal, a Yellowcake pedal, it's been done by hand.
Okay.
Like, I'm not used to doing any surface mount per se. The Lida machine does have one surface mount chip in it, but I did that by hand myself. Which, because the chip is big enough, even though it's still very small, it's doable. You can surface mount certain things by hand, as long as you're very careful and take the time. What I would do with the Lida machine is I will just go ahead and do a batch of circuit boards that have that surface mount chip on there, and just go through and just put those on there and then set them aside. And as I build, it's just so I don't have to do that later. It's just already done.
Yeah.
And but yeah, everything is hand wired. Yeah, everything.
That's awesome. So now your artwork, where does that come from?
The artwork, I mean, I do the artwork. I do all the artwork myself.
Oh, cool.
I don't farm anything out to have anybody do anything. I'll take images that I see somewhere, like, I don't know, something a favorite, anything. I always try to make and I alter it and I vectorize it to make sure that I'm not infringing any copyright or anything like that. Usually what I do is I'll wait for somebody to say, oh, it looks like this, and I'll be like, nope. Or like, where did you get that from? And we're like, I don't really like to kind of give that stuff away typically. I mean, a couple people I've told, like, just like sitting around having a beer talking or whatever. But I don't really typically like say, if somebody points out like, hey, that's from that, I'll be like, yes, you are. You're correct. The name fried, like, for instance, like the name Fried Gold, that came from Shaun of the Dead. Okay. Because, like, I love that term. Like, how's that for a slice of fried gold? And I was just like, that'd be a great name for a freaking pedal. I was like, that'd be fantastic. Because originally I was going to call the Fried Gold Your Mom, but I didn't think it would fit. And at that point, it was only my second pedal, and I thought it would be a little bit I wasn't ready. And it doesn't really fit with that kind of sound anyways. Fried Gold sound fit a lot better, in my mind. And I'm just getting some new enclosures of the Fried Gold, because it has come to my attention, and after many questions from other people, and not actually taking the time to do it myself, but actually finally taking the time to do it myself, people have asked, does it run on 16 volts? And I'm like, I don't know. Well, should I try it? And I'm like, probably not, because if you blow something up. But then it would just kind of like, then people would just like, well, I like it the way it is now, it's fine. But like, it actually, on an isolated power supply, I took a doubler cable on my Voodoo Labs Power Plus 2 or whatever, and doubled up 2 9-volt outs and run it at, it runs at 18 volts. And it definitely has a louder punch. And it's not a IC-based circuit, it's a 2 transistors and a FET. So it's not like there's none of that in there. It's just basically a hotter, just more juice to that, and it was not meant to be done on. I didn't know that it would run at 18 volts when I designed, put it together. It was just kind of like one of those things you never thought about that somebody brings up, and you're like, oh, I don't know. I should probably look into that at some point. Yeah. 2 years later, I finally have. So, to anybody listening out there that has one, sorry it took so long.
Now, that's awesome. I mean, that's kind of like, I've heard those kind of stories before, like with builders, where they kind of stumble into some things, and find out things that they didn't think about originally, and, that kind of sends it on its own path and makes that particular product unique. Now, I'm looking here at the MK Ultra and the Lida machine, and these are some really interesting pedals that you don't find anything exactly like that out there.
It's part of the thing is that, like, I kind of want to try to be as different as I can, but also not overthink too many things. Like the MK Ultra I really like the octave up effect, kind of like basically like when Earthquaker just did a Tentacle, which was like, and they'll tell you it's like basically a green ringer, and nobody was really putting those out, and I thought I really like that. I would really like to do one, but I don't want to do one like that. And then I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, hey, why don't you, Adrian from Marmolex, he does some small batches and stuff for people, and he's also works full time, and he plays a lot of gigs on the side as a bass player and stuff, or he's mostly a bass player. And he was like, what if you took a fixed wah and then blend that into that? I was like, that'd be a really good idea. Let me try that. So basically, the mind knob is like the blend. The mind knob is the blend knob. So basically, your octave up is always on. So when you're twisting that blend knob, that mind knob, it's blending in to the rest of the circuit, the fixed wah, and the control is basically the pitch of your wah, your sweep or whatever. So that really low wah sound, and then turn it all the way up, and it gets that kind of like that higher, basically like a wah pedal, like a fixed wah pedal. It's not an inducted wah pedal like a Crybaby, because the inductors were just too expensive, and I just didn't really figured I would. This sounded, I tweaked it enough to get it to where it works. It's more economical. It sounds great. It's meant to be a stacking pedal. I mean, you can play it by itself and have fun with it, but for me, to get the most out of it, you need to stack it with another fuzz and put it first in your chain, just like like how you would do a green ringer anyways. So typically, to get the most out of it.
Yeah.
And then the Lost machine was just kind of like, there's been resonant filters out there, which I didn't realize at the time when I was doing it. When I was like not even a year ago, it was like January and February, I was really finishing up a breadboard, getting things ready to try to start doing some proto boards to try it out and see how it's going to function and stuff. And then the Blurst comes out, which is kind of similar to that, only it's one LFO, and they've got the tap tempo. And then somebody was telling me, it's like, oh, the Interstellar Orbiter. And I was like, what's that? From Earthquake. I was like, oh. But I was already doing 2 LFOs, and I was like, but the synth guys that have tried it out really like it, and it's great for guitar. And I made sure that there's a CV in, so if you want to add some synth modules to it, or if I wanted to do something down the road that could feed into that too. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to be like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And now I'm going to have to maybe do another version or make a change. I don't want to do that. So yeah, so it was definitely like that one really, and I wanted to release it last month at Summer NAMM. So I really pushed really hard to get this thing done, because I had obviously you run into some bug problems. You have bugs you have to work out. You have other things you have to do. You have a full-time job. You know what I mean? All these, so it would kind of it got pretty frustrating, because I was trying to make a deadline that I set for myself. and I'm glad I did because the reception was very well. Premier Guitar is going to do a review on it. I've got an ad that I'm going to run in next month's issue of Premier Guitar. It's got just a small little ad near the back of the magazine. It's going to be in there. I'm finally starting to be able to do a little bit of print advertising. But yeah, I wanted to do something completely different because the last 4 pedals were, I mean, I love them, but they're kind of like, I don't want to do another fuzz. I don't want to do another this or another that that's in the dirt box realm. I want to kind of do something different.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm looking at the write-up on this, and I remember that I played it and thinking it was really cool. But what it is like kind of off the beating path, where I think players will, if they get to play one, they'll say, man, this is really something different, that like, you know, it's not like the next delay pedal, or, you know, like the things that keep cranking out, you know. And
right.
Yeah, and so it's really got something unique going on with it. And plus
I definitely wanted to do, that's the approach I wanted to have with it. And when you're doing that, I'll tell you, it's always very, you know, kind of scary, because you're like, well, it could really just totally not turn out right. It may not even make it to production after you spend hours and hours on it to get it ready, or to get it to something.
Mm-hmm.
And to be any, you know, just to have something just sort of like a prototype in your hands. But it's like, well, at some point you're kind of like, well, I've come this far. I really think it'll be okay. Let's just do it, you know. And the extra LFO, like having an extra LFO in there, I thought was really helpful, especially with the foot switch to turn it on and off if you want to. Because on the main LFO, you can totally just turn the depth knob completely down, and it totally cuts it out of the circuit, and then just add one LFO. And I have a friend of mine who's plays a lot of synth stuff, and he's just like, I only have one LFO in my little Moog synth, and I love my Moog synth, but I only have one LFO, and I hate that I only have one LFO. He's like, you can never have, in his opinion, you can never have enough LFOs. And he's like, and you put 2 in. And I was like, oh, so I guess I just liked it because it sounded really crazy.
Yeah.
You can like vibey and phasey with it if you want, you know. It's not meant to be a tremolo pedal or a phase pedal. It's supposed to just get spacey and wibbly wobbly crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of achieve that. But even though that's kind of like, it's not meant to emulate that as much as I just kind of wanted to get some really weird, wacky sounds and turn up the resonance knob to get a little bit of oscillation there, and have the expression pedal in for that if you ever wanted to do that, you know. Everybody's different, and also be able to branch out and be like, you know, you not only can use this for guitar, bass, or whatever, you can use this for pretty much any instrument, synth, whatever.
Yeah, and that's really cool. That's something like EHX, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of do a lot of crossover between like key type effects and guitar. I mean, they're mainly guitar effects, but there's also a platform where a lot of guys are picking them up for keyboards and things like that. So I think that's a market that needs to be explored a little more.
I definitely, for sure. And Earthquaker does that too. They have several boxes that people are using with synths. And I think the other thing too is, even if the pedal is not geared towards a synth to
Mm-hmm.
use with a synth, people are starting to find out just by experimenting and trying things out, because just because it's not a synth pedal, or it's not a pedal that's for a synth or a synthesizer, or, you know, to mix in somewhere like with a drum effect or whatever, people are just starting to take pedals and just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just see what it sounds like, and it can really sound really great, because like the same guy, his name is Brad, and he's in this band called Null that they're based out of Birmingham. He has a furry burrito that he runs with his synth, and he, for whatever reason, loves the way it sounds. I like the way it sounds too, but he hears things that I don't hear through his synth. Because, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I always have that thing on with, it just adds something that I didn't have. You know what I mean? Just like that extra dirt, punch, grind, whatever. Hey, perfect. That's great. Like, I know a guy that uses the fried gold with his stand-up bass.
Oh wow, yeah,
Great. I mean, okay, that's great. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. Just go explore. Not even just with my pedals, with anything. Just,
yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, I could see all kind of applications. Like you're in a studio and you pop that, like you get a balance, change the balance on it, and pop it on a
Right.
snare drum or something. Like to record with, or just weird, crazy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just, I'm not sure if it's just because people had never really thought about, or that, like, it's just like, well, it's not a bass pedal, so probably shouldn't really use it on bass. Well, have you tried? And I think that's kind of where things have started to go in the last several years, where it's like, just get freaking crazy with it. And
Yeah, yeah. Well, I definitely saw it now. Like, there was a lot of really insane bass players at these booths who are doing things at these booths that typically you don't think bass players would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of space out there for that.
Oh yeah, there is, and it doesn't, it could be anything or anybody's gear, or just, I just think that people are just more apt to experiment now than they used to be, and also because of all the demos that are out there now and all the gear that is out there now, because there is a lot of gear that people are just starting to like. I saw some an Earthquaker video where this lady had a harp, those really huge old, that's the best way I can put it. And she was basically, however she was plugged in for what kind of, probably some kind of condenser microphone. And I'm not really sure what kind of audio interface. And she was plugged into, like, essentially the whole Earthquaker line on a huge pedal board. And she was doing getting all sorts of weird sounds. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was like, and like, woodwinds, brass winds, that kind of stuff. Just get in there and get crazy with it.
Yeah, and I think too, like the day is gone where people, bands are cool, and being in a band's fun, but the days where people have to depend on being in a band when you're a instrument that pretty much doesn't fit outside of a band, like people are finding that you can play bass guitar, you can play some instrument that's not guitar and be a solo artist, especially with all the backing tracks. I mean, you go to like any kind of vacation spot or whatever, and you see like these solo musicians, and like I was last time I was went to Disney World, there was a guy playing harp that was a solo artist, and he was playing like with backing tracks, and he had all kind of interesting sounds that you wouldn't think would come from a harp, and people are just using what they're talented on, and they need these types of tools if they're gonna stand out and be able to be a solo artist.
Right. The loops, they're looping their stuff, and they're doing this and they're doing that. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's a good kind of crazy with the technology as far as it's come to be able to do a lot of stuff just by sitting at home and come up with a lot of weird stuff. I think that's great. Yeah. Because I don't think that the majority of the pedal gear crowd, regardless of whether you're like a real a full-time touring musician, or you're just doing it like mostly just in the tri-state area, or just out of your house, or just for fun, or for an escape, or for whatever, or sitting there watching The Voice and American Idol going, oh my gosh, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think that they're getting any kind of influence from that kind of stuff, because I think that, because as far as that goes with vocals, it's just, just telling people they're not good enough is, to me, I don't know. I know this probably goes on a different tangent, but I just have a real problem with that.
Yeah.
Where people are not listening to that kind of noise and just kind of doing their own thing and coming up with their own stuff, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. I mean, it has to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think the day and age where, and I think it's made possible by the internet and whatever, and these online communities, that people can find a way to, maybe they won't become wealthy and famous,
Right.
but they can find a way to support themselves with the art that they make.
Right.
And it's just it's very interesting. And yeah, it's like podcasts, who would have thought podcasts pop up, but like I'm constantly hearing of a new podcast popping up, and there's people who you never knew were out there who you'll find as listeners who like whatever you're doing, the brand. And it's the same thing with pedals or making music, or there's so many people out there who are looking for something, and when they stumble on it, they want it.
Right. Not only that, not even just that, but like it's a good way to get exposure for whoever it's on the podcast, because somebody may not have even heard of you before.
Right.
I mean, it's not like Yellowcake is a household name, because it's not, and that's fine. I mean, would it be great if it was? Sure. I mean, it would be fantastic, but I mean, I'm not doing it because I want to be on the cover of some magazine or whatever. I'm doing it because I just love it, and whatever, just kind of like, the stuff that you do, because you play music, you do the podcast, you probably work a full-time job.
Yep.
I'm not sure if we ever had that conversation.
No. Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
You also play music.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's kind of like, you do it because you like it. You're not doing it because somebody's holding a gun to your head.
No, it's finding an outlet to get out of the normal daily grind and be able to get these things out that I feel like are important to me.
And not only that, you get to meet so many.
That's it.
You get to meet people too in the process.
Yeah, I know. Like starting the podcast, I never had the intentions of going to NAMM, or a few weeks before that, I went out to California to cover Cowerfest, and just never would imagine that just doing something as simple as a podcast would, open up the opportunity to go do those things. And
right.
So, yeah, it's just whatever. It's like if you find something that you do, and it energizes you to do better in life, I say run full throttle with it. Don't be scared to being a failure, or not being famous or something like that, because I think
you're doing it for the wrong reasons as far as
exactly,
fame or
exactly.
I mean, I'm always scared of failure, but I will fail. I mean, I still fail. I mean, that's just part of it. It sucks. It's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'm not even sure why I didn't have some kind of huge anxiety about doing my walking around the first summer NAMM and really putting myself out there. I had no idea what to expect. I don't know if it's because I just didn't know any better at the time or what. I mean, because I'm usually a pretty cautious person when it comes to like making any kind of like putting yourself out there type thing. And I just, maybe it's because I just hadn't in a long time got on forums on the internet and read about other people, because I try to stay away from that, because it can get a little bit toxic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really want to go out looking for just anything that's bad that people say about each other.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to. I'm on a couple forums, Facebook groups, but I never really interact, because I typically just don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I don't want to. I'll occasionally post something as a response that comes up on my Facebook, but I typically don't even post a lot on Facebook anyways. I do mostly the Instagram, and then push that to the Facebook Yellowcake page. And pretty much it. And it's not like I'm not trying to. It's not like I'm avoiding people or being a dick or anything, because I think that maybe some people could think that, but it's just like, man, there's only so much time in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that there are, like, when you see a guy who's in business for himself and he's doing a lot of that, I see a lot of, they get mentally exhausted trying to balance all that. And then, as ugly as these forums can be sometimes, they get in a position where they have to defend their product. And then, it depends on if somebody, this guy is going to try to slam you about this or whatever, and I just hate those situations. I think it's a very like smart thing
It can
sometimes.
go sideways really quick.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I mean, if you're on any like the big forums, you see it all the time. Like somebody,
and some people just love to stir the pot. You know, if that's their thing, you know, fine. But like, I just I don't want to be involved in that end of things. Like, look, I have product that sometimes is faulty. Okay, if you call me, if you email me, or whether it be a person that's bought it or has it, or a dealer that has it, I will take care of it straight away. I will fix it. I will make it right all day long, because customer service to me is huge. And I'm sorry that it happened, but I will fix it. Okay? Because mistakes happen, or sometimes things just go wrong, and it's nobody's fault. And I'm not trying to get over on anybody. I will fix it. The idea of something not being right drives me insane. Yeah. And I want to have somebody have something that doesn't work and they want to use it.
Yeah.
And
couldn't agree more. I mean, I think most guys are out there who are, you know, boutique builders, pedal makers, guitar makers. They're just wanting to do the best they can, and everybody makes mistakes. Hey, that guy who's complaining, he makes mistakes, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, if he was under that same microscope, he might not appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
And so
I told somebody this before, is that like, you told me what was wrong with it, write it down on a little note card or sticky note or whatever, so I can just be reminded what it is. I mean, I'm sure I have it in the email and stuff, but I actually, if I can get them to do that, I do. And I take that sticky note and I put it on my computer screen around my monitor, and I make sure that it's there so it reminds me that to you know, whether it's something that I did wrong or something that, you know, which it happens, even though I test everything before it goes out. But like, hey, stuff happens, man. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
but I want to make sure that I want to make sure that like my mistakes are duly noted, so I don't forget them, so I can recognize that, like, you know, hey, you still need to kind of pay attention. This thing doesn't drive itself, you know. So one of those things you just kind of do to keep in check. That's all. Like, post your failures. Make sure your failures are right in front of you.
Yeah.
So you know that it's there. Anything can happen. It happens, and when it does, if it does, hopefully not very often, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. And if I've got a T-shirt in your size, I'll give you a T-shirt too.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for, really, as a customer, you know. And, well, Ryan, I appreciate it. We're right here at the hour mark. So
it is an hour.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But I appreciate you taking the time to just hang out today.
Yeah, no problem. I hope things are going well on your end down there. It's bloody hot here today.
Yes, it's very hot here. It was in the mid-90s. Yeah.
And it's nuts, but whatever.
Yeah, well, we didn't have that. I know we didn't have that daily thunderstorm come through to cool things down.
Not today.
Yeah, but every other day for the last 2 weeks.
It's hotter when it's done because of the humidity. The humidity's been unbearable lately.
Yeah. So I can't wait till, let's just fast forward about 8 or 9 weeks into the future, get the end of October or whatever, and it'll be a lot nicer.
Yeah, it will be. But then after a while, it starts to get really wet and rainy and stuff, and then I'm kind of like, oh, this sucks. I wish I'd rather deal with hot weather than this. Yeah. I can wear less clothes, but putting on more clothes can be kind of unbearable sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Clifton, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate you having me on the show. Definitely want to come back and do it again.
Absolutely. Yes, we'll have to do that. And if you aren't familiar with Yellowcake Pedals, go check them out. He's got some pedal demos up on his website and some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and I need to start a YouTube channel, so look out for that sometime soon. Soon, question mark?
Yeah, and you can find you're on Instagram at Yellowcake Pedals.
Right, I am. Please come check it out. I'm always around. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Clifton. We'll be in touch as always, baby, just like you know how we are.
Awesome, man. Well, you have a good one.
You too, man. We'll talk.
All right. Later. Bye.
Bye.